Now I can bring up this.
Morning, Celeste.
Let's see those just saying.
Billy, how are you doing? Thanks for doing this for us.
Well,
yeah, you can say no.
no, we couldn't. You know
I've
that.
had people say no.
Really?
Yeah.
You won awards?
Hey, how are you doing?
No way.
Or we wouldn't answer.
Well, we just wouldn't answer their emails?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's,
Well,
that's the worst kind of. Just ghost you.
I
It's really
appreciate
awkward
you.
when they bump into them in the hall.
Oh, you asked me to, that's what you much, oh, really? No, no.
So they won't let me
sign.
Go ahead.
No, thank you.
Hope you say something. It's
Can I save it somewhere else?
a while.
What if I save it to Box?
Phone's amazing, yeah. you-
Why, window open?
It won't open my email.
Quite here.
Why don't we go? Hey, how are you?
Good.
It's very odd that I can't get. Let me try it. Let me try one.
You get that.
Sorry. I sent you an email saying that we talk actually, because I was like.
Yeah, I said that before, I don't know if you got that. I got it. It's like, beginning of the month.
I remember saying that you were close to retirement. Taylor, how close are you now?
Register, no, register office, no, he said, what are you gonna do about this? Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Figure out what we can work there.
2023.
I like what you want to do. It's just it doesn't work for this- this system.
Okay.
Sit by each other? Yes. So why don't I? Well.
It's concerning me.
Hey, Gordon.
I would do
Families get over it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hazelnut bread, yeah.
What is?
Hazelnut bread.
My hands are
They can request. Be fair.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Perfect. Oh, I love Sarah.
It's like all of them. Certain super.
Okay.
What do you think?
Oh my gosh. Did you share we had the laughing?
We asked them to tell you guys. Are you gonna come again this week? We're going again for Grace Day.
So.
You just
I
have
went there,
revelations.
college,
I would imagine that's how it goes over
but
there.
it might be good for, yeah, lots to go, when, is it for the?
That's Wednesday night.
Karen, you know, it's like,
Darren?
yeah.
Really
Yeah.
cut it.
I keep saying.
See, whenever you have cut it, happy to be.
I actually,
It's for you, isn't it?
Ready whenever you are.
Okay, well, welcome, everyone to our master teaching lunch for this month. Grateful that you're here and we have Kelly Patterson and Chris Karpowitz. They're going to be talking with us today and doing a discussion on what they did and what they do. And to get us started, I've asked Gordon from the special work to give on the food. Then Kirk right here is going to introduce our speakers.
Father, we are grateful for this time that we have to spend together. We're grateful that we have resources that will allow us to come together and to take this food. For many that are struggling at this time, for this food that will strengthen us to do good, as we are counseled to do by our leaders and shown by thy Son. We pray as we learn and discuss today that we can be good examples of disciples of Christ and all we say and do, and we can model that for our students and others. We're grateful for those that have prepared for this always, and grateful for their service, and we can learn much and do good. So this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Since there are two of them, I had to write it down. Well, it's Kelly, I'll start with Kelly. We're both professors in the political science department. Kelly, he was an undergrad student at BYU and did his PhD at Columbia University in political science. Kelly does research on campaigns and elections, public opinion, political parties. And I would also call him an amateur political philosopher in the best sense of the amateur. He teaches some of our courses there in American politics. And of course, one of the reasons we put him here is that the two of them helped direct the American Heritage course here at BYU. Here at BYU, his administrative assignments have included being chair of the Department of Political Science. He was chair when I was hired. He's been a director of the Center for the Study of Elections and Democracy and an associate dean in our college. I want to see he was Laura's predecessor. Right? Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not my fault.
Yeah. Kelly's married to did you just call her Janine? Janine. Okay, Janine Patterson, and they have two children. He also enjoys running. He's really avid runner. Chris, on the other hand, Chris, I have to say, I don't actually know if Chris has any hobbies. So, yeah.
Not many, but
Kansas basketball.
yeah, that's
Okay, all right. Go with that. And Chris is native of Kansas. Also his undergraduate degree at BYU and his PhD from Princeton University in Political Science. He's also a postdoctoral fellow, and his research and teaching interests are diverse. So we can mention political psychology, and we'll see today a bit about civic engagement, political participation, deliberative theory, communication, experiment, public opinion, presidency, and American political thought. Here at BYU, he's co-directed the Center for the Study of Elections and Democracy and served many thankless years as one of, I think our college's representative on the University of IRB committee. Yeah. Not this time.
I'm not the only person from the college.
And again, with Kelly's help director, American Heritage class. Chris is married to Jordan, who is here today, works in the dean's office. And Chris, I've lost track. 4 children? We have 4. With a few, I think, even at BYU. And that's all.
Thank you. That's awfully kind. We're delighted to be here today and a little intimidated, I
Very
would say,
intimidated, yeah.
about this responsibility, and we're eager to talk about our experience in the pandemic. So we've titled our talk today, Modeling Political Discourse in a Polarized Era. I'm too bald and unathletic. I think that was faculty members learned to collaborate during the pandemic. We started collaborating before the pandemic, but it really took off in a new way during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think probably to help set the stage, what Chris said is quite true, that we used to teach American Heritage in different sections, but all aspects of the course were the same, where we collaborated on all the lectures, we collaborated on all the quizzes and the exams and everything. The only thing that was different was that Chris gave his lecture to his sections and I would give the lecture to my sections. And he was more dynamic and I was less dynamic. Students like his sections better than my sections, even though they were the exact same sections.
This is way overstated. But, I did dance better than I can say. So as there's a history of collaboration, and as we were in the first months of the pandemic and anticipated what was coming at us in the fall of 2020, we started talking about what needed to happen. We knew that we were facing a variety of challenges associated with the pandemic, and that we would very likely need to connect with our students online or remotely. We had a deep fear that those remote sessions would look like hostage videos from our basements. And that's sort of what we wanted to avoid. We also knew 2020 was interesting for other reasons. As political scientists, we knew that the election was going to be interesting, close, challenging in a variety of ways. And we knew that we wanted to build on the integration that we had begun. And so our thought was, how do we provide an engaging course remotely, where students are engaging from wherever they are, from all over the world. We had someone connect from Afghanistan.
Yeah, someone who was deployed in Afghanistan was taking our class. I don't think we can overstate, I think we all lived through it, but the challenges of going into that fall of 2020 and the pandemic year when it wasn't quite clear how the university was still going to do certain things with in-person and the like. And American Heritage traditionally has 3 sections of 800 students and 3 sections of 250 students. And we didn't have any place big enough on campus where we could actually do in-person courses and keep people socially distanced. So that meant quickly going to the remote delivery model, but the remote delivery model, once again, had already been vetted by lots of students and they found it less than satisfactory. And so did many of the faculty. So we started brainstorming with Kristen, who's the course administrator for American Heritage, in April of 2020 to try and come up with a way to make this happen.
And in doing that, the other thing that was important to us, given the election context, was how could we model appropriate political discourse? How could we help students engage with issues, including very controversial issues, about which people have passionate feelings in ways that were productive and constructive. How could we help students consider the other side of issues? And we'll talk more about our successes and failures in that regard. And so you can see that we set to work trying to create an environment where we could do this online learning, and we transformed the American Heritage Review Room into a studio. And we did that with a lot of help. So we started by talking to KBYU about whether we could use some of their facilities, and we were told that education of students is not in their mission, which was a surprise to us. And that we could maybe occasionally use one of the studios, but we would always be the low people on the totem pole, which meant that if Studio C wanted it for any reason, we wouldn't be teaching American Heritage that
A
day.
less than enthusiastic reception does not do justice, which they told us. Yeah, this wasn't going to work for them. And once again, he's not making this up. He said, student education is not part of our mission. And so we started casting about for other resources.
We had lots of conversations with Kristen, and we were incredibly fortunate to connect with Ron Ralston. So the one thing BYU did was tell us to connect with Ron.
They said, go talk to OIT.
Yeah.
Which, that works out well sometimes.
We were nervous about that suffice to contact OIT, but we did connect with Ron Ralston, who's a former news producer.
Yeah, just invited OIT from, he lived in New Jersey, he just moved from New Jersey, where he's been a producer for CNN and Fox, and had also done all sorts of other television producing. He was on the Al Gore campaign in 2000. Florida decided the fate of the republic. Yeah. So anyway, very experienced and perfect for what we need.
And Ron caught the vision of what we had in mind almost immediately, and was very excited about it, and brought his expertise to bear in a way that we just were incredibly grateful for. And it's not just Ron. Ron has a whole team of people, but American Heritage has a team of people led by Kristen, and we have video resources from Cindy Kern, and we received a great deal of administrative support. Ben was willing to go along with our crazy ideas and help us to arrange to do this. Sven Wilson in our department as well, and Jeremy Pope, who was the chair of the Faculty Governance Council in American Heritage at the time. All of them were just really willing to let us.
Turns out crazy ideas cost money.
Yeah.
And while there's lots of money at the university, nobody likes to part with it for crazy ideas. So we felt very fortunate to have the support that we did. Of course, from Bruce as well, Bruce Bergen, who is like.
Bruce was there with us at every stage.
Always holding our hands.
Yeah.
It'll be okay.
This will happen.
We'll figure out some way to do this.
Let me just let us tell you a little bit about American Heritage. American Heritage is an interdisciplinary course that seeks to bring together history, political science, and economics. There's a heavy focus on the founding era, some pre-colonial and colonial history, then heavy focus on the founding era, some discussion of political and economic development since the founding, lots of discussion of basic principles of economics, and some discussion of the role of the nation in the world. As we teach it, we use 3 texts. We draw heavily on Michael Sandel's Justice. We found that Sandel engages some of the ideas that we care about and talks about values and principles in a way that is not only very engaging for students with terrific examples, but that for us at least, really nicely marries with the American Heritage text. So we use his book as well as the American Heritage text, and then we have used Keith Whittington's American Political Thought book as well, which allows students to get a flavor for what political writers and thinkers of various kinds were writing and saying at various periods in American history.
American Political Thought is a compilation of various thoughts across time, examples of original writing, the commentary.
So that's the basic setup of the course. As we taught in this online format, there were three elements that we wanted to bring in. The first is some coverage of substantive material. We'll talk more about that. Second, some opportunity for us to talk together and for us to, again, model civil discourse, model ways of engaging productively with challenging or controversial ideas. And third, we wanted to bring in insights from students. And so we worked really hard on all three of these elements of every lecture. And you can get a sense of sort of what it was like for us in this studio. At each lecture, we did it one time, broadcast out each day to 1,500, 2,000 students.
You can see sort of the elements of the set. Back here, not quite as obvious, but we had a student who would sit at a computer and monitor the chat in the classroom. And then there were three cameras, one camera on a sort of on rollers, and the other two were fixed on either ends. And then this was what the slides came up on, a big screen. And then across here, there were four large screens vertically that had images from the themes of the lecture that day. So there were always images that were sort of reinforcing what we hoped to teach that day. We'd like to take credit for that, but we can't. Images put together from a variety of different sources and offered up to us, and so
We had a lot of fun choosing them.
we had a lot of fun choosing them.
And those donuts in the bottom left.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those were donuts. That was the economic principles lecture that day. That was the day
We
auctioned.
actually auctioned donuts off remotely, and we took them from the studio with a remote camera to the student who bought them. I think they bought them for what, $100?
$100
$100?
donut camp.
And so we took Donut Cam to Helaman Halls.
Where a young man came out in a towel.
That made us very nervous.
Very nervous.
We were not sure what was going to happen at that point.
Yeah, there's certain sort of unscripted element of live television. Well, literally, the student came out in a towel to pick up his donuts.
It became a running meme then. What was
How else do you eat donuts? I mean, I don't either.
Let us say just a little bit about each of these three elements, and mostly we want to spend the rest of the time fielding questions and sort of talking together and getting ideas from you. So as I said, we organized the course around some substantive themes and values. We wanted to start at the level of sort of high level values or concepts and show the ways in which those concepts can conflict internally and the ways in which conflict can occur across values. So we thought about values. So Sandel, for example, raises values of like freedom and welfare, right, and equality. And how is it that we manage those values and the trade-offs between those values? And so we wanted to help students see what was at stake in some of those value conflicts, and to start at that high level and then to move to concrete examples.
We thought it was really important to start at that higher level, almost that highest level of abstraction, because that's where you can have the discussions and where I think the most questions reside. So people aren't coming in with sort of preconceived notions of how necessarily those questions get solved. They're deeply philosophical questions.
And we tried to choose readings where students could see those value conflicts, Sandel's work on the moral limits of markets versus some authors who say there really is nothing that shouldn't be a market. And so helping students see those contrasts was a really important part of our choices for readings, as well as how we structured the lectures. And then we tried to have some discussion. Sometimes it went to the dogs, but mostly we had good
This was
discussion.
part of our fundraising day. This was actually my daughter's black fund who showed up to help us raise money for what was the
Right.
for the food drive. Yeah. It was a mistake because after Nina showed up on set, every other comment was bring back
Bring
the
back
dog.
Luna.
The dog. We've had enough of it.
Luna has
She's wearing a BYU band.
her own Instagram page and everything. So we share some broad philosophical commitments that we agree about. We don't always agree about which principles should prevail in specific circumstances. And we try to model for students how to engage some of those differences. So we try to highlight for them that there are disagreements on this issue. And as I said, we tried to start at an abstract level and then move to specific examples to see how those value conflicts play out.
And some of the differences between us are kind of philosophical in nature, and some are just sort of experience in nature. Chris, having served the mission in Germany, and I served the mission in France. France being sort of the pinnacle of the Enlightenment, and Germany began to sort of repress the light. So
You see what I have to deal with. Well, so we then also tried to incorporate insights from students. We did this in a variety of different ways, and some of those ways worked well and some of them did not. So we had online quizzes where students could give their answers remotely, and we could see the distribution of opinion in the class. This is an example. We call them Patterson polls. We could then see the distribution in the class and talk about it. We tried to do a moderated chat with a TA moderating, and we found that to be pretty overwhelming for the TA. 2,000 students in the chat at once is just sort of really overwhelming. We did a variety of different activities. In the aftermath of the election, we did what we called Karpowitz After Dark, where we brought 2 comfortable chairs to the studio and sat there and just answered student questions. We had them submit questions in advance and answered those, and that was interesting. We got our first flavor of election deniers and what they were worried about in the aftermath of the election.
yeah, there were several questions about the county ballots.
Yeah. From students from Arizona, especially. We then went to choosing 5 or 6 students in advance. We tried to get a diverse selection of students, and we would provide them with questions in advance. They could remote in via Zoom, right? And they would show up on this monitor in the back. And then we would come to points in the lecture when we wanted student comment. We couldn't do all 2,000, but those 6 students, different 6 every lecture, sort of stood in for the students, for all the students. And we would ask them their opinions and they would give their answers. And sometimes they were really interesting. And
Sometimes they agreed with each other and sometimes they
they
disagreed with each other.
Yeah.
But they did it in a respectful way.
That's right. And that was nice for us because it is a very odd experience to teach 2,000 students and never see. And so being able to see the students' faces and talk to them a little bit before and after the lecture was incredibly helpful to us.
So did you select them like alphabetically? How did you select these students to contribute every month?
Kristen, do you want to talk about that?
What we would do is we'd have our TA send an emails out to their students, saying would anyone like to do it? And then we'd go through those names and try to get a balance of like different perspectives, maybe different parts of the country or the world, and things like that. When we did the Texas, we had a Texas, well, not a Texas Day, but we're trying to find all the students from Texas to be on the panel. So there are different things that the professors were looking for. And then I'd work in asking the students, we'd send them up the same links and the questions in advance.
Cool. Texas has a special relationship with American heritage. Because Texas doesn't think it's part of American.
They have a unique sense of things, and it always amazes the other students when you ask the students from Texas at the beginning of each school day, right? How many pledges did you say? And all the rest of the students say, one. We said the Pledge of Allegiance. The students from Texas say 2 pledges. Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas Pledge. And so when you get the students from Texas to say the Texas Pledge, you get a sense of,
The other students are horrified.
yeah. They're a little disturbed by it, but you get a sense, it's a great way to talk about federalism.
Yeah, yeah.
So we tried to incorporate these things in a variety of ways. We had some successes and some failures. So we think that this was an interesting way to incorporate new technology. We tried to emphasize an extraordinary team. And I can't say enough how much Kristen is part of this team. Like, as Kelly and I think about the course, it's really a team of Kristen and Kelly and me. And we're the three of it wouldn't be possible without Kristen. It just wouldn't. Because we did, there's so many elements of this course that are beyond what happens in the lectures, and coordinating with Kristen is vital to that. And Ron was a key part of our team as well that year. We tried to be creative. We tried to model civic discourse and engage ideas. And we think that we were able to deliver some sort of meaningful educational experience to thousands of students in the pandemic. And I would say maybe the biggest thing that happened was a deepening of our appreciation for each other. I can say that my teaching has changed in a variety of good ways because of my connections to Kelly.
And the same goes with me with Chris. It's why I think team teaching could be encouraged a bit more at the university for some of these different goals that we're talking about. I mean, it's an amazing experience to learn from one of your colleagues and learn all the time from one of your colleagues.
And the process of creating lectures and editing them and deciding together, it's hard work, but it has been an enormous joy in my life. And I cannot tell you how much I care about and love Kelly, because I just get emotional talking about it, because we just have this really deep bond because of what we've experienced together and what we've tried to do together. We had some successes, we had some failures. What we did in the pandemic really isn't replicable for everyday use. It's expensive, it's labor intensive. I would say, to put it kindly, it's not always appreciated or understood by people over in the ASB.
You're doing what?
Please take that studio down
Yeah, please
and
take it.
don't erect it somewhere else.
Don't put it up
That's what
somewhere.
we were told at the end of all of this. We, I think, confronted the limits of online learning, and that gave us a better appreciation for what needs to happen in person. I know that happened for lots of people during the pandemic, but it certainly happened for us as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether we took it as a compliment or not. And several of the students said, I really like this class. It reminded me of watching NFL game day.
Not what we were going for.
No.
And we had to figure out how to balance engagement with the substance versus entertainment. You know, a couple of students said, "Oh yeah, I love it," and I totally forgot to take notes. You are still responsible for the material that we're talking about, and so we had to learn a little bit how to do that. We confronted the challenge of what happens at the extremes of the opinion distribution. We see that a lot in the United States today. We saw it in our class. We can see it on this campus. We saw it in our class. And one of the things that was a challenge for us is that for people at the extreme of either end of the political spectrum, not knowing us in person was challenging. If they just saw us through the screen and they could never come up to us afterwards and say, "Hey, I don't understand what you meant when you said this," or, you know, "You said something positive about Franklin Roosevelt. Like, are you really the devil or not?" Right? I mean, they just couldn't come and talk to us. And that meant that it was easier in some cases, I think, to make us the other. We just came to them through the screen. And so we struggled with that. That's not every student, it's not most students, but there are students at the extremes of opinion, and not being able to talk to them one-on-one in person was a challenge.
Yeah, it was. And like Chris said, at the extremes of the distribution, right? There were students who said, "It's obvious you don't love the United States," and other students who said, "It's obvious you don't care about the marginalized." And so it was a little hard to kind of help people understand like what we were trying to do. But I can't stress enough the importance of like staying at that higher level of abstraction at first, as sort of a way of helping to kind of start the conversation about what's right and what's wrong, where, you know, the philosophical origins of various opinions about the way in which we organize society. And if you do that, then you can say, well, I'm not here to like convince you one way or the other, like to either be an American or not an American. That's not. I'm here to help you think about the principles sort of at the foundation. And so long as you could always return to that, and you weren't defending any particular policy position, it helped them.
Yeah, being able to give students some basic concepts and values to which they could come back and think about how their current opinions or their opinions about contemporary topics connect to those values, I think was helpful.
Yeah. And the examples matter a lot about, you know, to help think about what these principles or these abstract concepts mean. So one of our favorite questions to ask students is when we're talking about market principles and how everything, you know, the argument that market principles should infiltrate various aspects of society, and it's just more efficient, and that's just the best way to do it. We ask questions about general conference tickets. It's the best way to distribute them is through a market. Right? Like tickets to general conference, it's okay to just get them and sell them online. They say, no, that would be wrong. And we say, well, why is that wrong? And it gets them thinking sort of about some of these larger goods that, you know, kind of at the larger level of abstraction, higher level of abstraction matter.
And I would say that BYU is an especially good place to engage these questions of value, right? And I think we were able to do it in a way that is unique. And one of the things that we try to express to our students is the importance of thinking constructively about their values and thinking about their religious values too, and starting with those. We end the course by essentially appealing to them to when they feel conflict between their political value, their political perspectives and their religious values to give their religious values pride of place. So,
Thank you.
thank you. That's what we have. We're happy to answer questions.
One of our students drew this.
Really?
This was their impression of
It's interesting to me because I always identified more with Ernie than with Bert. Joyce.
Question. I know I teach very small classes, but the retention rate was awful during COVID. So many dropped out. Did you find a high rate of dropouts from American Heritage during that time?
What would you say, Kristen?
I would say it was similar to any other
Yeah,
semester.
I
I
don't
have to
think
go
we
back
had-
and look at the numbers, but it didn't seem.
Didn't seem any
Not
like
at all.
yours.
Nope.
We work really hard as we teach American Heritage to keep students in the course. We think it's incredibly inefficient for students to be taking American Heritage multiple times. And so we work hard at it, and we have instituted, as we teach it, we've instituted second chance testing. So that means if their final exam is higher than either of their midterms or both of their midterms, it can replace those scores. And that has really revolutionized how students think about their performance in the early part of the course. Because we do get a set of students who are very surprised the first time they take a college level midterm, right? They're not prepared for it. They didn't know how to study despite all the resources that we try to devote to that. And so we've found, for us at least, not all our colleagues do this, but for the two of us, that has made a gigantic difference in keeping students engaged, because they know if they just can make it to the end and do the final, they have to take the final to pass the class. And if they'll do that, they can probably pass. We tell them that they have to work pretty hard to fail the class. They have to focus in the eye by not doing things. But if they do everything, they're almost certainly going to pass the class.
Did you learn anything that you wanted to bring with you out of the pandemic into the current classroom?
Yeah, actually, the one thing there are lots of different things we thought about, but we thought this would be a great mode of delivery. Like, maybe it's flipping a course, but what we would really like to do is sort of talk about the substance through this sort of format, and then go into much smaller sections and just have conversations with students. So
What do you mean by this sort of format?
like delivering it through like a studio online sort of experience, and do the kind of like some of the lectures that way, but then spend the bulk of our time in the classroom with students. So free us up from like the standard model, but have more in-depth discussions with students across multiple sections. I looked at, so what it reinforced for me anyway is just sort of like personal, how important it is to do a significant personal dimension to all of our teaching.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this sort of approach allows us to do things that we couldn't do in a regular lecture section, but it also prevents other things. And so as we're scheduled to teach again in the fall, and we've already started talking about how we can incorporate some elements of this while still retaining what's incredibly important, which is to be in person with the students. And so we've thought about ways of doing this where we talk about the broad principles in some sort of online format, and then we engage in specific cases or specific examples in smaller groups. right? So maybe we take a contemporary controversy and or case and talk about that in light of the principles. So we're really, you know, sort of in the midst of trying to think about what we need to bring from this experience to the next time we teach in person. And
The best part of teaching is in the smaller environments in which you can look students in the eyes, in their face, and see how their day is going. That's virtually impossible with the large sections that we teach. And but you can deliver some of the content in fun, engaging ways, and then take what you save and then just make sure that you're really in the classroom with them. And then the second thing I take away is like, it's really good to work with colleagues. It's just find somebody you like or who can stomach you. Chris can stomach, and so that's right. And then work with them. It's revolutionary for the way in which you teach. I think it is. And I understand why, you know, with FTEs and everything like that, and course loads, that it's discouraged, and it's not appropriate for every situation, but it really is. It can really be a great experience for the students and the faculty. There's Ben.
So the discussion part of it seemed really positive. How are you gonna do that next fall? Are you gonna like occasionally go in and have a discussion?
See, that's what we were trying to figure out.
Pre-record a discussion or something? I mean, because
Sven experimented this last year with having panels of students just come up on stage with him. So we're trying to think about different ways of doing that. We've always had some element of ability of students to respond. So we've used the eye clickers in class to get a sense of opinion distribution. And we've spent a lot of time thinking about, well, what are questions that we could ask where we can go out in a large group and get where we're likely to get a variety of opinions, and we can get those fairly quickly. So we can do that still. But trying to get these more in-depth questions, I think that's something we're still experimenting with. I think it worked really well to let students know in advance, these are the questions we're going to ask. So come prepared to talk about this question. Kristen, what else would you say on that?
I would disagree. And Sven has been doing it, and he does let the students know in advance. He doesn't do it as often, so it's not every single lecture. But when he does do it, it's amazing to see how students will disagree, but they've had a model to them how to do it civilly. And so they can be up on a stage in front of 800 of their peers having a really robust conversation and not agreeing with each other, but still being able to sort of defend their perspective. It's sort of great to see 18-year-olds doing that.
Yeah, that is what I thought, that the wonderful thing about this team teaching, I don't know how you guys choose each other, because, you know, I can see you love each other very well, very much. That's wonderful. But at the same time, certain, you know, differences over like German, how you think about German and Germany,
Just
and
have to
also,
ignore them.
right, but
It's the ugly side of this.
but I think it's great opportunity for students to see the two different opinions, but civilly kind of discuss each other. And I think that was really precious to me. It's just so hard if you do it by yourself. You can't do that.
It seems forced if you just do it by yourself.
And our differences on Germany and France actually, I think, work to the advantage of helping students see that, you know, we can have fun with those disagreements, even though we do sincerely have a disagreement about which country is better.
Yeah, so this is where I just tolerate it.
I don't know if you're able to speak to it, but why were you told to take that down and not do it? I don't,
Well, that's a long conversation.
okay,
I guess the short answer is we built the studio in the American Heritage Review Room. And so as we move back to in-person learning, we needed a review room. That review room is too small for the course as is. So we had proposed to the administration that they give us different space in the library, which from our perspective, they have plenty of, but that's not the way they saw it.
And the set was going to, there were other uses for the set beyond American Heritage. The set was, they were doing church firesides from the set. They were doing church missionary.
The MTC used it,
And the
yeah.
MTC used it.
Graduation.
Graduation from it.
Graduation.
Yeah.
We lecture.
it was great.
And, yeah.
But I will say that the day we got the message that it's like, take it down and don't you dare put it up somewhere else, that just felt like a twist of the knife. We agreed with them though, that we needed to be in person. So we agreed with that idea that.
Yeah, this wasn't some ruse to try and get out of
Are you
doing
modeling
in-person
civil
teaching.
discourse here?
Huh? What?
Modeling civil discourse right now.
Speaking truth to power.
The academic freedom policy allow you to do that.
That's the one thing that, Michael, you hit on something that is sort of like, because you're on a hot mic.
Yeah,
And so you have to learn a little,
we did learn that.
restraint, and that's really hard for me.
We talk politics all the time with each other and we joke about politics together a lot.
And one day we were doing that, and then over our earpiece came, hey, there are other people listening in on this.
And that was humbling and eye-opening and a good reminder for us that we really were trying to model civil discourse and that we needed to model it all the time, even when we thought it was just the two of us sort of, I mean, yeah. I don't think we were saying anything deeply offensive, but we were saying something in a way that that supporters of one candidate felt was belittling to them. And that's not what we meant, but that's the way it came across. And so it was a good reminder for us that we needed to model that all the time in how we held. Bruce?
So at the end of that, I sampled a lot of the students, find out what they thought of it, how did the technology and all that go and everything. And the bottom line was, this was the best semester of American Heritage. They had wished others told me, I wish I had taken it that way back then, or I hadn't taken it, so I could have had it then. What was the feeling that you got? That it was better than the other semesters?
I thought it was. That was my best semester.
I got that
I
from the
think-
students besides the t-shirts. I mean, they were saying this was the best class ever.
Well, we
Well,
were.
it was, well, sorry,
No, go ahead.
but it was during the bar wasn't really. Both for American Heritage and other online courses. I mean, they said it's the best online course ever. I was like, yeah. It's sort of like watching, TV at the Chevron gas pumps, right? It's like-
There were some classes in which they had waited to take it then.
I will say that, our standard was that this shouldn't look like a hostage video.
Yeah.
We did exceed that bar. I think in terms of of our editing of the lectures and our presentation of the material, it was the best we've ever done. But there were lots of other things that inhibited student learning that semester, that year. We taught it the whole academic year. And I don't think we can evaluate it without taking those things into account. And so I do really believe that not being able to see the students face to face was problematic. It was problematic, as we've tried to say, for students at the extremes of the political distribution, but it was just harder for us to, when you're teaching a lecture halfway through and you can see all the blank faces, I have to slow down or I have to stop. Something isn't connecting, right? And we couldn't do that except if the TAs got in our ear or Ron or Kristen got in our ear and said that what you just said was incomprehensible. You need to start again. And that happened a few times, but mostly they said, you're too close to the camera, move back.
Or gotta figure out some way to take that shine off your
That. I'm standing right under the light. Distracting.
After the lecture, they're up there putting, filters on the lights.
I don't know, Kristen, what else would give me? Kristen has seen American Heritage a million times. What would you say were the strengths and weaknesses of this?
Weaknesses, first of all, is that you didn't have a chance to meet with your TAs one-on-one. And that to me was I think sometimes in American Heritage, the TAs are the professor students. We have 45 of them. It's not a small group. And that one-on-one meeting with the TAs, even though we tried to do our very best job over Zoom, and some of the things that we did over Zoom, I've incorporated on our TA training since then. It was just really hard for that relationship to be built. The TAs love working with the professors. That's one of the bonuses of their job. So that to me was a hard thing about it. And not having a review room for students, that was hard because the review room was the studio and we couldn't because of social distancing procedures. So those were the two weaknesses. But as far as the positive, I can't tell you how much the students loved Chris and Kelly and how they made the lectures so engaging. You think they wouldn't be engaging? My mom, who was 89, she's 90 now at the time, she watched every one of their lectures because she thought they were so great. She loved them. She still always is following their articles that they write and calls me every time. But I think that's how all the students felt. Like they truly knew that these professors cared about them and they're doing everything in their power to make it a good semester for them. And I think that's one thing that it's almost like that combined students that freshman year was American Heritage. They didn't have anything else that was really their thing. And American Heritage was sort of their thing. Donut guy, towel guy, the donut camp, the memes that came up. We had lots of memes sent to us. There was an American Heritage Instagram page where they talk about the different things that they talked about in lecture. We've never seen that before. So I think the engagement was high.
It's time to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Why they received the award for innovation and great work they did. So thanks so much and thanks for teaching us today. We have one more this semester. A master teaching lunch ends in November. John Felt from history. So have a dessert if you have a few left there. You like that size?
I do. Downsizing. Yeah, it's just.